Hi everyone. Good afternoon. Ambassador, thank you for having me and giving me this important podium. Such a difficult situation. I see lots of division and confusion, lots of hatred, lots of misinformation. And everybody speaks on behalf of the children and on behalf of the innocent. But I am not sure about their real intention. But today I can speak on the authority of a Palestinian child, someone who grew up in that culture. Hamas' first crime against children in the Palestinian societies is not arming them or encouraging them to carry suicide bombing attacks. It's the religious, ideological indoctrination that I had to go through. With one intention in mind: to annihilate the state of Israel. This is Hamas' primary goal. In this truth, there is no confusion. I speak as first-hand witness on Hamas and their intention. My father is one of the founders of Hamas movement. I was there when Hamas was born. I was before Hamas was born. And as I said before, I will be there after Hamas is dead. I am not a part of propaganda. I don't work for nobody. I only represent myself. And on this authority, I speak. So don't be mistaken and take my words very carefully. Hamas is committing a crime against this generation and the next generations to come. So blaming Israel is not going to solve the problem. Imagine a 10-year-old child. When I disobeyed Hamas, I was tied up to a post and I was whipped by Hamas top leader. And I don't want to mention his name because he's not worthy. With the electric cable. Every lash, I lost my breath until I lost my consciousness. My father was in prison at that time, and this leader thought that he was my mentor. This is Hamas discipline. This is how they wanted me to be. To become a violent savage like them. And the very basic intelligence of a child, when I felt that was not natural, it wasn't, but I had still to go to the mosque to please my mother and please my father and obey this type of monsters. I hate to talk about my personal struggle, and I hate to be in a position to be at defense. He also don't like to be at defense, because this is what Hamas did to Israel on October 7th. They put all of us at defense. But this doesn't mean that we are not going to win the war. up in that society. Majority of the Palestinians blamed Israel. And as a child, I took it as a Quran. I took it as a holy scripture that Israel was our problem. But then as I grew up, I start identifying the enemy within. The religious authorities, the corrupt leaderships, who basically did not care about children, they did not care about Palestinians, they still don't care about nobody but themselves. And the world has been empowering them against the prey, against the victims. This has to come to an end. Let's put my childhood on the side, because maybe a child does not see things for what they are. Maybe I was very bad. I misbehaved myself as a child to deserve to be beaten up again and again and again by Hamas leaders. And some people say, is it a personal problem? Well, it is a personal problem. Do you have any problem with me having Hamas problem as a personal problem? It is a personal problem. And I swear I will not die before I see Hamas dead. Can I make this a goal to my life? You know, unlike many of the leaders who sit here and give Hamas legitimacy by not condemning them, if the entire world stand there and say otherwise, the child witness within will always be there, and nobody can deceive that child anymore. Then, as I grew up, I become the Hamas or the Islamic student movement president in our town, and I became part of the movement. It's just out of the love for my father and our family. I had no other choice, which somehow led me to imprisonment at the age of 18, just few weeks after my 18th birthday. May 28th, 1996. My problem was not Israel who arrested me during that experience. It was Hamas again, but this time with a lot more brutality, a lot more pain than the pain I experienced on a personal level. In prison, Hamas tortured and killed hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, Hamas members, because Hamas had suspicion that they were collaborating with the state of Israel. I spent 16 months in that first arrest among Hamas leaders. What was called Al-Majd, Hamas security wing, for those who don't know, this division of Hamas. This security wing, they brutally tortured people, putting needles under their fingernails, burning plastic on their bodies, putting off cigarettes in their skin. Screams of hundreds of prisoners over that period of time. How could I forget? And I don't wish for any of you to go through such experience, to realize what type of monster we are dealing with. It's unfortunate that my father helped establish such an organization. And I don't mean to dishonor him. I love my father and I will always do. I'm not here to dishonor my people. I love my people. But I cannot believe how far Hamas was able to travel in this madness, and we could not stop them. After I was released from prison, I made very hard choices. And I don't have the time to go through all my motives, but yes, I had many motives. Many motives to fight against Hamas, and I still do. And nobody can get in my way. Not even the United Nations. So the choices I made were against any rational mind. I ended up working together with the Israeli intelligence for 10 years. We had a common goal. That goal was to stop suicide bombing attacks. Hamas, for those who don't know, or those who have short memory, carried many suicide bombing attacks during the 90s and the early 2000s. Dozens of suicide bombing attacks where a suicide bomber took an explosive built, went into inside a bus and blew himself up, killing all type of people. Not only Israelis. Americans were killed. Europeans were killed. Other nationalities, including Israeli Arabs, including Muslims. Hamas did not differentiate. Take Hotel Park, for example. On a holiday, on the most sacred Jewish holiday, a suicide bomber go into the dinner, blow himself up, kill more than 30 people. Some Holocaust survivors died in that attack. Dolphinarium, some teenagers having fun at the beach. Hamas suicide bomber killed about 18 and wounded dozens. Look up, see how many buses. It did not stop there. Hamas attacked the Hebrew University. 6 Americans were killed in that attack. They targeted synagogues. They targeted everywhere. Knowing the Israeli retaliation, they invite violence. They love violence. Hamas, without chaos, cannot survive. It's their climate. This is where they thrive. When the peace process came, if you follow the history of Hamas and their development or their evolution, whatever you want to call it, Hamas, what sabotaged the peace process through suicide bombing attacks. And they don't have a vision. That's the problem. Because nobody can satisfy their ambition when they are waging a holy war. We're not talking about IRA. We're not talking about other political terrorist organizations that we can pressure them, bend them, bring them to the negotiating table. We are talking about a religious group that does not believe in political borders, that wants to annihilate an entire race in order to build an Islamic state. I don't know what else can be said about this group. And I don't know why it's not obvious to everybody that the United Nations fail to condemn them. Bunch of rapists. This is what they are. Lower than animal consciousness. So, I don't speak only on the authority of that child and someone who grew up in the Palestinian territory, I also speak on the authority of someone who has 10 years of experience in a counterterrorism of the Israeli intelligence. It took us 8 years to capture someone by name Ibrahim Hamid. This mass murderer, 8 years he hid in a small town of Ramallah, less than 20,000 people. It took us 8 years to capture him, while he was sending suicide bombers every other day. It was a big nightmare to capture him. And you know now what they are doing? Why the hostage situation that we have in Gaza? They want him. He's on the top of the list to be released. Ibrahim Hamid, remember his name? Look him up. They want mass murderers to go back to the street. And if you ask yourself, the guy that you saw earlier, Yahya Sinwar, with the child and the rifle, this guy was released just recently, part of the prisoner exchange with Israel. When Israel had to release more than 1,000 Hamas members to return one Israeli soldier back to his mother, and Hamas had a taste to that. So they thought this time they can go and bring 200 hostages and more. So they can bring the only true democracy in the Middle East to its knees. This is why it's a very brutal war. For those who are in the intelligence communities, they understand the significance of this. And they know that that Israel cannot release more Hamas terrorists. Because this guy, you saw, Yahya Sinwar, he is the mastermind behind the attacks on October 7th. And how can Israel afford, or how can any of you validate or prove the release of mass murderers back to the street so they can carry a lot more terrorist attacks and hijack an entire society, use hundreds of thousands of people as human shields? Is this our way of solving the problem? We need the correct vision. First of all, we need to identify the origins of suffering, where it's coming from, where does it originate from. We need to identify the disease. Then we can provide the cure. Up to this point, we haven't identified the disease. And for those who know the problem, they don't have the courage to stand and say, we have a problem with Hamas. But most of us have our own calculations. From Russia to China to the rest of the superpowers, given Hamas cover. Hamas gave the attacks on October 7th as a birthday gift to Putin. For those who did not make the connection. And I don't want to go farther. Now nobody's talking about Ukraine, using Hamas as the wild card in the Middle East, igniting a religious war to just divert your attention somewhere else. All those criminals, whether they were high profile or low profile, they are all savages. They are all enemies of children and enemies of humanity. The United Nations and the rest of the international community have empowered con men who used what's so-called Palestinian cause to become richer. They were seeking power and wealth. They did not care about the Palestinian people. As the children of Gaza sink in despair and poverty, leaders of Hamas, along with their families and their entourage, enjoy the Four Seasons Hotel in Doha, Qatar. We can continue putting our head in the sand, but then we have escaped our responsibility. I can't go on and on for hours, or should I say for 6 years of my life. But I don't have the time. I don't have the time. If we don't eradicate Hamas this war and this time, if we don't eradicate them, the next Gaza war is going to be deadlier. It's going to be much greater. If today we are complaining about 10,000 casualties, even though I'm not sure about the numbers because it's Hamas statistics, I don't trust anything they say or anything they do. But even if it was true, it's actually a miracle that we have only this number. The next war, we were talking about hundreds of thousands. This is the 4th war with Hamas and the 5th war in Gaza, because also Islamic Jihad had their own war. If we don't eradicate Hamas and other terrorist groups in Gaza this time and give Gaza back to the people of Gaza, we will give them legitimacy. We will show them that we are afraid. And tomorrow, they will come back with vengeance. What made Hamas attack this time a lot stronger than the past wars? Because under the international pressure, we had to negotiate with them. And we had to give them legitimacy. This is what encouraged them and gave them power. You know, Qatar, for example, it's a member of the United Nations, playing the mediator, etc. They could have fooled me. They are the ones hosting Hamas. They are the ones who have been funding Hamas. Russia, Musa Abu Marzouk, a Hamas top leader, was in Moscow just yesterday. Okay, to be more accurate, a week ago. What's this? Where democracies should be united in fighting such savages. All of us saw Hamas. You call a hostage situation, but you want the true term Hamas uses for this? Booty. It's not even hostages. It's not war prisoners. All of us saw Hamas, savage, grab a teenager girl from the neck, pushing her into the unknown. That's your very freedom. That girl represents your freedom. And none of us thought about the mother of that kid and how she felt about seeing her daughter being dragged that way by a savage who wants to dominate, who sees women as a property. This is how Hamas sees women, a property, something they can own. As they want to own territory, more territory, their lust, their sexual lust, their lust for power, their lust for territory. I had to die many times in order to transcend this mentality. So we are talking about a big problem. It's beyond Israel. And here is the danger. And with this, I will conclude. The danger if Israel fail their war in Gaza, which is a brutal war, Because if it was open war, Israel would annihilate Hamas in no time, matter of hours, let's say days. Hamas is finished. But since Hamas strategy, it's a strategic thing of Hamas to take human shields. This crime cannot be forgiven. None of us should forgive this crime. Gambling with children's blood for political gain, it doesn't get worse than this. So Israel now got stained by blood. This is what Hamas wanted to happen from day one. They wanted to sacrifice thousands of children so Israel can take the blame. Digging tunnels and bunkers under hospitals, schools, launching missiles. A Hamas misfire, how many people killed at a hospital, and they went so fast to blame Israel, and the rest of the world listened to them and listened to their propaganda. Nobody is concerned to check what is true and what is false. Whatever that serve our political and short-term interest, we go for it. Suicidal, not knowing that we are going against evolution. We are going against the collective consciousness of humanity. We're going against the interest of children, the defenseless children who has no one to speak on their behalf. They don't have the power to discern. And yes, they are dying. But who's causing all this death? Blame is the cheap way. It's the way of the coward. Those who have the courage take responsibility. They don't blame. Hamas is not defeated. If Hamas is not eradicated in Gaza, we will set the model. We will give the freedom to so many radical groups around the world, especially in Europe. Because many of ISIS have fled to Europe under civilian cover. They are sleeping cells in Europe. And there is a migrant problem in Europe. And there is an Islamic problem in Europe. And this is just a warning. If you really care for the global security, and I speak as a person who was part of the counterterrorism effort against radical Islamists, if Hamas is not defeated in Gaza, it will inspire many groups around the globe. They will see that few thousands of savages can blackmail the international community, the superpowers, and bring democracies to their knees. Many of them are watching now, and many of them are very happy about how the world is responding. And many of them are satisfied to see the state of confusion and fear and anxiety. This is the time to get united. Because if Israel fails in Gaza, all of us, we will be next. Thank you for listening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. May God bless all of us and protect our children, not only the Palestinian children, but also the Israeli children. Bring the hostages back to their families, and may God bring peace to this divided world. Thank you very much for listening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mus'ab Hassan Yusuf, for those who don't know me, but I think most of you know who I am. I am sentenced by my father to death. He made my blood allowed. Why? Because I reported on suicide bombing attacks that targeted civilians indiscriminately. This is my crime. And guess what? It is not a secret that you discovered. It was my initiative that I revealed myself to public of what I did, because I am not ashamed of saving human lives. You should be ashamed for taking the side of terrorists. Also, I am not going to apologize for reporting Hamas and for reporting terrorists. And know that we will fight anyone who takes the side of terrorists. Hamas is a terrorist organization in the UK, in the United States, in the European Union. And it's not up to you to decide. Sit down. Now listen, only Sheikh Hassan Yusuf has the authority and the power to pull the trigger. Not you, not him, not her. Only Sheikh Hassan Yusuf, if he has the courage to point the gun at his oldest son and pull the trigger. Anyone else who tried to do that will be dealt with differently. Now, how many of you sitting here want to teach me a lesson about morality? If you knew about October 7 attacks, any of you, raise your hands. If you had information about Hamas attack on October 7, would you report it to the authorities? If you do, raise your hand. Sit down. Less than 5% in this room raised their hands that they will report a massive terrorist attack that targeted civilians indiscriminately. That includes Arabs, Muslim, Jews, Christians, peaceful farming communities on October 7, ethnically cleansing 20 Jewish communities because of their ethnicity and because of their religion. What's happening in Gaza is not the same, because you are the one who's taken the side of terrorists, knowing exactly your role, and you are enjoying it. But at some point, you will have to deal with the consequences, because everything is recorded against you. Now, there come the Palestinians, the most pathetic people on planet Earth.
Is out of order.
Sit down.
The speaker is out of order. If the speaker order, when the chair is making a ruling, the speaker must remain seated. If the speaker repeats this again, I will have to ask him to leave.
They want to delegitimize someone who's born in that land.
A point of order has been raised. It is directed to the chair. A point of order has been raised. I have to hear the point of order. I have to hear the point of order.
Sit down.
Could I hear the point of order from the member? Order.
Sit down.
Order. It is not for you to tell a member to sit down. A point of order is directed to the chair.
Sit down.
Order. 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 Could I hear the point of order from the member for Senate Control?
Then get out.
Order.
The speaker just insulted me personally and insulted many Palestinians, and I asked him to be escorted out of the chamber in the same manner that a fellow student was escorted out of the chamber when she was alleged to have insulted.
Order. Order. If this is repeated again, I'll have to ask the speaker to leave. The speaker was out of order. Please continue.
What? What? This house has been hijacked by Muslims.
Could I hear the point of order? Could I hear the point of order? Order. Could I hear the point of order? Please have a seat. The point of order is behind you.
What order?
Could I hear the point of order from the member? Could I hear the point of order? Order. Could I hear the point of order? Please state your point of order. 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 Could I please hear the point of order?
The Speaker made absolutely no reference to anyone in this chamber. He cast an opinion on his own people. Will he please be allowed to continue to debate, given how important his voice is in this conversation?
Order. 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 I've made my ruling very clear.
What is your ruling? I did not insult anyone in the room.
Order. Order. Could I hear the point of order?
Given that this is a speaker who once invited by this union, was then attempts being made to prevent him from coming here to speak, and now we have seen that committed again in the course of this speaker speaking, he has a right to freedom of speech, he has a right to speak in this chamber as an invited guest of this union. To order him out as a result of the opinion he has expressed on his own people brings this union into disrepute. It is a moment of shame for this chamber.
I have heard your point of order. I have made my ruling very clear. Could the speaker please proceed without making any disparaging references to any population? Please continue.
They want to delegitimize my right to exist because I oppose their violent ideology. Then they want to cry day and night of a victim. Please sit down.
I have to hear the point of order.
Insulting Zionists, Israelis, Israel being a nationality.
I've heard the point of order. You have seen a member being asked to leave the chamber before on a different side of the chamber. I have made sure that people from both sides of the chamber are allowed to make their speeches and that they're allowed to be heard. Could I please allow the speaker to finish without any further points of order?
Okay.
Please continue.
All the interruptions are not going to help the situation. You'll have to face the reality and the truth the way it is. I was born in that land. It's my birthright. And I was born, sit down, and I was born as an Arab. I was not born as Palestinian, like millions of Arab children. And the Palestinians have been pushing the Palestinian violent indoctrination based on false narrative of apartheid, colonialism, genocide, occupation. While Palestine never existed as a sovereign country, it never existed except as a colonial entity. And the joke on the Palestinians that they actually claim to be indigenous of the land, fighting against colonialism, while they choose a colonial entity as their national identity. How pathetic is that? I find it really unbelievable that the Palestinians continue spreading this lie and millions of people around the world are believing them. If you ask them what is Palestine, sit down. If you ask them what is Palestine, they don't know how to answer. If you ask them what makes a Palestinian Palestinian, they don't know how to answer. Stop, interrupt me, sit down. We heard you. Sit down. Stop, interrupt me, and listen. Now, their strategy, and this is what need to be discussed here on the floor tonight, is the use of human shield and the evil practice of sacrificing children for political and financial gain. This is the mastery of the Palestinians. This is what they've been doing. They want the children, the Arab children, to continue carrying the burden of their sick indoctrination for eternity. Then a bunch of people come here crying as victims or as the saviors of the Gaza children. And I tell them, who authorized you even to speak on behalf of the children of Gaza? If you want to dismantle the apartheid state, he wants to dismantle the apartheid state, and none of you paid attention of how dangerous that. This means he wants to dismantle the state of Israel. This is what he wants to do. And that means the ethnic cleansing of the only Jewish state. Don't interrupt me and listen. What he wants to wipe out a nation, the most ancient nation in the Middle East, the most authentic nation in the Middle East, the only Jewish state on the planet, and he wants from the children of Gaza to do the job on his behalf, on behalf of his political ambition. And I tell him, why don't you go carry a rifle and fight the apartheid state? Why the children of Gaza supposed to fight on your behalf and on behalf of your righteousness? You are not the savior. This is a very severe state of mental illness that you think that you are the savior of Gazan children, because you are not the savior. And all now they talk about genocide. Israel sent leaflets, millions of text messages. They made phone calls. They gave safe passages to people to evacuate war zone. While Hamas embedded under schools, hospitals, they did not leave any sacred zone for the civilians to evacuate to safety. Then they booby-trapped the entire area. And Israel had to send its foot soldiers to suffer additional casualty on the top of October 7, while they had the capacity to carpet bomb the entire Gaza Strip. If their intention, you never been to Gaza, you don't know what you're talking about, so sit down. After the war, what was the day? Where did you go? After the war, after October 7,
Order. Can the speaker desist from addressing other members? Okay. Order. Can the speaker please be heard? Could I please ask the member who's allowed to desist? Please conclude your speech.
Israel did, for those who are here to listen, by the way, it's very, very important, and I will remind you at some point in the future, when we look back at this time of confusion and the push of the Palestinian violent indoctrination, they are going to hit a dead end eventually. But here, let me be a witness to history and to you. Israel did everything within their ability to minimize the civilian casualty in Gaza. While Hamas did everything in their ability to maximize the civilian casualty.
The speaker will be heard.
Hamas did everything within their ability to maximize the civilian casualty for political and financial gain, for global sympathy, and they succeeded of fooling so many people. But this is not going to change the reality on the ground, because Hamas does not care for the Arab children. Hamas does not care for the Jewish children. Arabs and Jews, yes, your insults can challenge or defy my truth. Arabs and Jews can get along. I have faith in that. Arabs, we are an ethnic group. We were way before Islam came to the region. We were way before the Palestinians came to the region. And by the way, the Palestinian history started in 1964 with the keffiyeh and the Palestinian flag. This is their heritage. That's all they have. And we are not Palestinians. We are Arabs. This is our language. This is our culture. And we will continue way after the Palestinian thugs who came to hijack our society with their sick indoctrination and victim narrative. The victim narrative. This is not representing who we are. We are resilient. We don't accept to be victims. Israel will be our strategic friend, and we will get along. Kurds, Jews, Arabs, Druze, and the rest of the region. And I hope that the Palestinians will know their place in history, nothing but a false identity. This is who they are, and this is how they are going to end.
Order, order.
امنیت ملت ما تعرض کنن، ما هم به امنیت اونها تعرض خواهیم کرد بدون تردید. این رفتار فرا گرفته از قرآن و دستور اسلامه و این وظیفه است که بر عهده ماست.
That would be a terrible thing for them to do, not because of me. If they did that, they would be obliterated. That would be the end. I've left instructions. If they do it, they get obliterated.
آمریکایی‌ها نشستن روی کاغذ دارن نقشه جهان رو تغییر میدن. البته فقط روی کاغذ، در واقعیت هیچ گونه واقعیتی نداره. درباره ما هم نظر میدن، حرف میزنن، اظهار نظر میکنن، تهدید میکنن. ما اگر تهدیدمون بکنن تهدیدشون میکنیم، اگر این تهدید رو عملی کنن ما هم تهدید رو عملی میکنیم. امنیت ملت ما تعرض کنن ما هم به امنیت اونها تعرض خواهیم کرد بدون تردید. این رفتار فرا گرفته از قرآن و دستور اسلامه و این وظیفه است که بر عهده ماست. مذاکره با آمریکا هیچ تأثیری در رفع مشکلات کشور نداره. اینو باید ما درست بفهمیم. اینجور به ما وانمود نکنن که اگر نشستیم پشت میز مذاکره با اون دولت فلان مشکل یا فلان مشکل حل میشه. نه نخیر، با مذاکره با آمریکا هیچ مشکلی حل نمیشه. ما در دهه 90 نشستیم با آمریکا مذاکره کردیم حدود 2 سال. یک معاهده هم تشکیل شد. البته آمریکا تنها نبود، چند کشور دیگه هم بودن، لکن محور آمریکا بود، عمدتاً آمریکا بود. دولت ما نشست مذاکره کرد، دولت اون روز رفتن آمدن نشستن برخواستن مذاکره کردن، گفتگو کردن، خندیدن، دست دادن، رفاقت کردن، همه کار کردن. یه معاهده تشکیل شد. در این معاهده طرف ایرانی خیلی هم سخاوت به خرج داد، خیلی امتیاز داد به طرف مقابل. ما همون معاهده رو آمریکایی‌ها عمل نکردن. همین شخصی که حالا الان سر کاره این معاهده رو پاره کرد، گفت پاره میکنه و کرد، عمل نکرد. قبل از این که او بیاد هم همونهایی که این معاهده با اونها انجام گرفته بود به معاهده عمل نکردن. معاهده برای این بود که تحریم‌های آمریکا برداشته بشه، برداشته نشد تحریم‌های آمریکا. در مورد سازمان ملل هم یک استخوانی لای زخم گذاشتن که مثل تهدیدی همیشه بالا سر ایران وجود داشته باشه. این معاهده محصول مذاکره 2 سال به نظرم به بیشتر یا کمتر این مذاکره طول کشید. خب این تجربه است دیگه، از این تجربه استفاده کنیم. مذاکره کردیم، امتیاز دادیم، کوتاه آمدیم، اما نتیجه‌ای که مقصودمون بود به دست نیاوردیم. همین معاهده را هم با همه این نقص‌هایی که داشت طرف مقابل باز خراب کرد، نقض کرد، پاره کرد. با یه چنین دولتی مذاکره نباید کرد. مذاکره کردن عاقلانه نیست، هوشمندانه نیست، شرافتمندانه نیست.
جنگ به نفع ما نیست. ما به دنبال سلاح هسته‌ای نیستیم. این رهبر عزیز انقلاب ما از نظر اعتقادی فتوا داده. حتی اونایی که ادعا میکنن میخوان این کارو بکنن نمیتونن تو این کشور ما رو به طرف سلاح هسته‌ای ببرن. برای اینکه در دکترین نظام جمهوری اسلامی ایران قتل عام انسانهای بیگناه به هیچ وجه پذیرفته نیست. راستی آزمایی اینم که کاری نداره. هر وقت هر موقع دلشون خواسته اومدن بررسی کردن، 100 بار دیگه بیان بررسی کنن. وقتی ما قرار نیست به دنبال این بریم، قرار نیست پشت سر این حرفا بشینن و هر روز بگن ایران داره این کار میکنه. کی داره این کار میکنه؟ اسرائیل میخواد این حرفا رو بزنه تو منطقه به همه کشورهایی که همسایه‌شان تجاوز کرده. همین اسرائیل. و میگن این حقوق بشره، این داره از خودش دفاع میکنه.
So what kind of deal would you be prepared to
Well,
make?
we're going to see. I mean, we're going to see. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. With me, it's very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. We don't want to be tough on Iran. We don't want to be tough on anybody, but they just can't have a nuclear weapon.
Mr. President, are you going to engage in conversations with your counterpart in Iran?
I would.
Do you want to block the sale of Iranian oil to other nations?
Well, we have the right to do that, and that's what I did before. And they had no money. They wouldn't have had the money for Hamas or Hezbollah or anybody else.
And why say that you're unhappy to sign it if it's Iran and their proxies who have threatened to retaliate against you and your team by killing you guys for taking out Soleimani?
Well, they haven't done that, and that would be a terrible thing for them to do. Not because of me. If they did that, they would be obliterated. That would be the end. I've left instructions. If they do it, they get obliterated. There won't be anything left. And they shouldn't be able to do it. And Biden should have said that, but he never did. I don't know why, lack of intelligence perhaps, but he never said it. If that happens to a leader, or close to a leader, frankly, if you had other people involved also, you would call for total obliteration of a state that did it. That would include Iran. So I'm signing this, and it's a very powerful document, but hopefully we're not going to have to use it.
Mr. President, when you said if they do it, they get obliterated. Just to be clear, you're talking about if Iran made an attempt on your life.
Yeah, that would be called total obliteration, and I can't imagine they do that. It should have been stated by Biden, but he didn't state it because he had no clue, as you know, as every.
The topic she raised has been raised elsewhere, and I'm interested in hearing you talk about it. And it's one of those. It's kind of an open secret. I remember, when the Afghanistan war was going on, I remember seeing a documentary about what was happening, at least in parts of the country, with the boys, boys in Afghanistan. I saw that documentary, and you hear things. But, I don't think it ever became a focus of the news. I want to just read, parts of a passage, and then if you're willing to talk about it. And one of the things, one of the questions I have in my mind is, why did this not become major news? Because if we're talking about little girls, it would have been a huge international issue. We're talking about little boys, and it was kind of an open secret. Anyway, so here's what you write. So later the next day, we found out that a man who was possibly Taliban, and there's one of the challenges of the war, right? We don't, who's friend or who's foe, right? They all dress the same. Had been for some time trying to steal a particular police chief's chai boy. So after a few failed attempts, this guy who was possibly Taliban resorted to drastic measures. He came by the checkpoint that night, got all the members baked, I guess that means drunk or stoned, and waited for them to pass out. He then proceeded to murder them all in their sleep and then take the shy boy for himself. And then in the next paragraph, you say, this is one aspect of the Afghan culture that is extremely hard for Americans to understand. The men especially are quite different from Americans. The fact that many of these guys are pedophiles is very difficult for us to reconcile in any kind of moral way. Not only do the men in southern Afghanistan keep young boys around to sleep with, it's actually a point of prestige. And so you write about how, even having a boy, presumably a really good-looking boy, is sort of a point of prestige. And you, in a different place in your memoir, you relate a story where a guy is basically on the point, you don't use the word, but basically on the point of raping a little boy, right? Mm. And you say that you're seeing this stuff constantly, right? So, so first of all, I'm wondering, if you could just talk about this things, you remember seeing and, what American soldiers said to each other as they're realizing that this is a deeply entrenched part of Afghan culture where we are, where, boys are, basically, I don't know what the right word is. I mean, are they being molested? Are they being raped? Are they being, I don't know, of men? And, so what kind of stuff did you see, and what, how are American soldiers processing this as they're becoming aware of what's going on?
I mean, most guys were just disgusted and had lost all respect for, any Afghan leader that we met. Like the Afghan police chiefs, one of them in particular had like maybe a 10-year-old boy that he would like show off to other leaders that would come out. And I didn't witness this myself, but like the interpreters would tell us they could like rent the boy out for all male parties and stuff. And they would like dance and perform, and then the guys would have sex with the boy, and like I said, we literally caught, adult men trying to, force themselves on boys and stopped them. And we're not supposed to do that, though. We're not supposed to interfere in their culture. There was a Green Beret that they tried to kick out of the Army because he stopped the rape of a boy. He eventually fought it and overturned it and stayed in the Army. But that's how opposed to us doing anything the United States Army was. And sometimes a family that was really poor would sell like a son into this practice, and we seen a boy being taken from his home. Like the dad was giving the boy to another male, and the mom came out without her mask on, like sobbing, trying to stop him. And you got to understand, we never saw the women in like rural Afghanistan. So she was like practically risking her life to save her son. They just took her back inside and ended up sending the boy out. And I asked the interpreter, I was like, what is going on here? And he's like, oh, they're selling this boy, they call it like bachi-bazi or bachi-baza, like boy play, selling him into this practice. And
wow.
Like guys just couldn't wrap their heads around it. It's just so foreign that that's like a normal thing, for them to do.
Now you saw some of these boys yourself?
100%.
What might sound like a stupid question, but when you're looking at them, when you're looking into their eyes, seeing their facial expressions, did you get the feeling that they were into this too?
No, not at all. Like guys would make sick jokes about it. Like we'd go into this one particular ALP police station, and there was one kid that they're like, dude, this guy's got a 1,000-yard stare that none of us are ever going to have. Like, you couldn't see enough combat to be as disturbed as this kid was. Like, he was glazed over and would just stare, at the wall. And he was dressed in like nice, Afghan clothes, and he would serve the men all their tea. But he would just sit there. Like, he looked the most traumatized human being I've ever seen in my life. Like, literally, he looked super disturbed. So, and you could tell there was one guy that, unfortunately, he probably helped us more than any of the other ALP leaders. He had just all child soldiers. That's all he had. It was just him, and then dudes that were like, kids that were 14, and he had the one that was his, his
Plaything.
yeah, whatever you want to call it. And that dude he had this ridiculously glazed over look in his eyes. He looked disturbed as well. And the other kids didn't. The other soldiers, child soldiers looked, normal as you could be in that environment. But you could kind of pick them out. They'd usually be dressed nicer. And some of them, for sure, those two guys I remember, those two kids, they looked traumatized,
So I don't anticipate that you're going to have a response to this, and so I just don't want to drop this on you. But I'm interested in any thoughts you might have. But yeah, I'm mystified by this idea that we can't do anything because we don't want to mess with their culture. Oh, well, wait a second. We've invaded their country. That's us. Slightly messing with the culture. We're saying that little girls are going to go to school. That is
Right.
definitely messing with the culture. We're saying that women should have equal rights. And we got NGOs in Kabul. So there's all kinds of messing with Afghan culture going on. But for some reason, this one is off limits, and it's just mystifying to me why. I have no idea why was this the sacrosanct part of Afghan culture that we can't touch. As we've got NATO troops, all over the country, girls are going to school. It's mind-boggling to me, and I can't make any sense of it. I don't understand it. I don't know if you have any thoughts in response to that, but it's mystifying to me. If it was little girls, it would have been there would have just been an outcry, international outcry. But with little boys, people know what's happening, but it's kind of an open secret. Don't do anything about it. I don't know if you have, I don't want to, just dump all that on you, but I don't know if you have any thoughts or responses to that.
Yeah, I wonder if that was so ingrained for them that they would just refuse to work with us. I wonder if they thought these guys will never even try to help us if we try to change this whole dynamic that they have. You know what I mean? I don't know if they had tried and it was just impassable thing. I don't know how much effort they put into it. By the time I deployed, it was don't mess. Everyone, I was told that was going to happen before I deployed. We were told not to bother them. I don't think we realized it was as widespread as it was. I hear it's way worse in the South and it's not as bad in the North, or maybe I've heard some people even say it doesn't happen in the north of Afghanistan. I've not been deployed to the north, so I don't know. But it was very widespread in Kandahar for sure. But I don't know, like if you brought it up to them in any way, because we would talk to the ANA soldiers sometimes with an interpreter, and we might bring something up about it. And it was just such a thing they did. They couldn't even comprehend that it wouldn't be right. You know what I mean? It was just, they were like, it was done to me. It was done to my dad. I'm going to do it to the next generation. They were just couldn't, it was just the norm.
No fear, be love, and give hope. Thank you, Jesus.